Hello, welcome once again to Cityscope. I'm your host, Jeff Pearson. Cityscope's a show that really focuses on how city governments all over the state can impact each other by sharing information and really highlighting what they do for their own communities. Today we have one of those departments. City of Charleston has a public works department that does a lot of things. We're going to break that down and talk about that. We're going to welcome our guest now, Brent Webster. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
So we have, public works is such a vast part of city government, our city, especially obviously Charleston. We're going to go through all the things that you do and kind of share some information. People that are out there watching from all around the state, not just Charleston, can learn how we run things here and learn how they may do their stuff there. First, let's go backwards a little bit. You've been with the city how long now?
In a different role, I was probably since 1994.
Wow,
November,
okay.
Yeah, so a long time.
I want to talk, we always kind of go backwards first before we go forward. So are you from Charleston?
Not from Charleston originally, from Hardy County.
Okay.
Moved here in 1992.
92. What was your first, we always ask, what's that first thing you remember about Charleston that kind of captivated you?
Well, it was a lot bigger than Hardy County. And of course, being a capital city,
Right.
and visited, as a student and as a fan of basketball with our high school tournaments
Right.
and things like that. But yeah, just thinking it was urban, much more urban than I was used to.
Yeah. Well, you can go back and use that now in your own work.
Right.
So did you come here to work for the police department?
Yeah, I graduated from WVU knowing that I wanted to have a career in law enforcement. So
Okay.
Charleston being civil service, you take a test and get on the list, and then it worked out. In November '94, went to the police academy.
Wow. One thing I want to talk, I don't want to spend too much time because we want to get with public works, but I do want to talk a little bit about your experience with the police department and being the police chief here in Charleston. For how long did you serve as police chief?
Yeah, I was the police chief from January 2005 till September 2017.
Okay,
So,
so a pretty
12
long
plus
run.
years,
Yeah. I guess for people watching, that's a difficult job, and you see a lot, and you saw a lot of change over those years in Charleston. What do you think was one thing you took away from that is the most powerful thing or the most successful thing that our city does in its law enforcement?
Well, the Charleston Police Department has always been staffed very well, and that allows the department to serve in a lot of different areas: community policing, drug enforcement, traffic division, criminal investigations. So it's really, even though Charleston's not a big city, it's a big type police department, and so it allows to have a full service, which is good for the citizens because
Right.
they get much more attention, much more quality service.
What's I guess one of the highlights? I know I know of one that I remember during your tenure that happened. But what is one of your highlights of being in that role? Or maybe something more general, just one single highlight, something you were able to accomplish in the community even.
Well, I think our neighborhood watch, our community policing program, our community policing had started before I was chief, but I really think we put it in. We went into steroids with community engagement. Our neighborhood watch program significantly grew, and I felt, just based on the conversations we had, we were so active in the churches and with community, the schools, that we felt like we were doing very well in that area of establishing trust. And the trust is always fragile because of the nature of what the police do. You arrest, search and seizure. There's an adversarial relationship.
Right.
Sometimes it's unavoidable. So we always approached it like try to make a friend with the community when you can, because not everything has to be adversarial. It could be,
Right.
It could be a community policing situation where you're providing information, looking for a lost child, or something. It's not always arresting and chasing people, those kind of things.
Yeah, and a lot of people, of course, know about some of the community work, but the vast amount of community work our department does, and the hybrid unit. Can you talk a little bit about that? People might not know about that around the state.
Right. I think the hybrid, it was really the bicycle unit when I was the police chief, and the name changed a little bit. But it's a very versatile group. I was actually in the bicycle unit for a couple of years back in the late '90s. But they're much more accessible because they're in bicycles. They're not in cars. They're not. And they are really good with crowd control, community events. For people enjoy talking to them more. They'll approach them more than they will somebody in a cruiser. And so I think that's where the hybrid, you can get a great amount of enforcement out of them, or you can get a great amount of visibility out of them, just
Right.
based on how the chief and the mayor decides to use them.
One of the things that unfortunately happened in the early 2000s, we saw a lot more drugs coming, not just to Charleston, but all over the country. And I know you were chief when President Obama came here. Is that correct? That's right.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that experience and how that helped our community and what we're trying to face even now.
Right, that was a drug symposium on the opioid epidemic here in Charleston, and I ended up being on the panel, and that was pretty overwhelming because we had a lot of great people to choose from. But I think it put a spotlight onto the epidemic. We know that we've been struggling with compared to other states, or at least in the Appalachia region. And so I think that it was good to bring more attention to it. And I would think, I can't show this, but I would think that probably some grants, more attention have come out of it. I know that we started the Handle with Care program,
Right.
With working through the schools with children that are having issues at home that we need to handle them with care. And so we talked about that on the panel with President Obama, and I think he was pretty impressed with it. But really it was part of his Defending Childhood initiative. We just took that and specialized it.
Well, I wouldn't sit here and say there's not still an issue in Charleston, but we've come a long way. And I think sometimes that's not as evident as people might think. That you mentioned Handle with Care. We also developed the Care Office. Not that that's either one of our jobs, but it's helped a lot. I'm sure you work a lot with the Care Office.
Well, yeah, we do. Yeah, really daily.
Yeah.
And and they really are. I think a lot of times, at least when I was police chief, everybody kind of pushed the homeless issue on the police,
Right.
Because they weren't equipped to deal with it. The care team has allowed some social services and other ways of handling that the police may not be equipped with, or it takes the police from their enforcement role and other, because the police have a lot on them. And,
Oh, yeah.
And you'll never be able to separate the police from that issue, but you can't arrest your way out of homelessness. That's not really the role of the police.
Unfortunately, that's a common thought. It was, well, just arrest them, and that's not possible. It's not illegal.
No.
And I didn't want to make this show about all of our challenges, but I think that's something worth mentioning is that your experience with the police department, and even with your current role, that's an issue that we have, a lot of people have, that we are actually doing a pretty good job of addressing with our care office and with the police department and even public works.
Well, it's an issue everywhere.
Yeah.
And 2 years ago, I spent a week in Columbus, and I was out driving around, and I had a child that was having a medical procedure there, and they had the same problems.
Yeah.
And they have more population, so they may have more volume of the problem. But it's a very difficult issue to tackle. And
the care office, and if you'll take a look and learn more about it, check out their website. But they have a lot of really amazing stats and their services, and even our shelters in Charleston. So I think that's an issue that we could spend a lot more time on, and it's a hot issue for a lot of people. And I would just end with saying that the city does a pretty good job of taking care of our homeless and even our shelters with the drug issues and what we have here. And it's a lot of work, and it's a challenge. It remains a challenge, but I think the city's done a pretty good job with it.
I agree. Yes.
Yeah. Let's shift gears to public works. So, police chief, how'd you go from police chief to public works?
The opportunity was afforded that the summer of 2017. My successor, and I guess he vacated the position in public works, and then that became open. And the thing about the public works director is that it's a great amount of public administration and human resources and management. So, you have engineers. We have city engineer, and we have different specialties within public works. But a big part of my role is facilitating, working with the mayor's office, working with a lot of constituency, and just making sure that all four groups in public works are rowing in the same direction.
I think just before we I want to break down and talk about each group. Can you talk, so I'll make sure I get it right. Let me ask you the question. What are the four groups?
Well, we have the street department.
Okay, yeah.
We have the refuse department. We have the public grounds department, and then our equipment maintenance.
Okay, I was going to forget equipment maintenance. Yeah.
Yeah, they're behind the scenes, but they keep us rolling.
Yeah, literally. Let's go ahead and talk about each one a little bit. And before I do, what's the biggest difference between, like, I guess, working for the police department now and the contrast of public works? Is this? I mean, you talk about management and things like that with HR, but what's the biggest difference, you think?
Well, the police have the powers of arrest.
Right.
That's the biggest difference, but there's a lot of pride in both groups. Being a city employee, both groups understand the constituency, the customer service.
Right.
But the difference is it's really just the mission, because the police is all public safety, whereas the Public Works Department, it's a great amount of public safety, particularly with trash and recycling, and then the street department with clearing the roadways. So, but that would be it, I think.
Yeah. But it's interesting because there's so much, and again, we're going to talk about a lot of it, but there's so much that happens in your department that's behind the scenes. I mean, again, even with, I'm going to go ahead and do my plug now, public art. I mean, there's been so many things that your department stepped in and helped us, whereas we're putting a sculpture in, and we need somebody to, help lay the concrete or help make sure that we have the proper equipment, and they're always stepping in. And you get hit a lot with those kind of things. This department needs your help, but in addition to public safety and regular stuff that you do. Let's start with streets. So for someone who's watching and has no idea, what's the street department do?
Well, of the four, they're the most versatile. They have their entire mission is to keep the roadways, the street department has the name, free of debris and safe and passable. But as that extends to potholes, there's a little bit of a lot of times when you see the new paving, that's contracted out, so that's not the street department. Street department has the ability to pave small alleys and maybe small roadways. They do have but mostly they're maintenance in the sense that they'll do potholes. Sinkholes that develop, they go out and if they can handle those, if they're too big. We work so closely with the city engineering department, and so a lot of the drainage issues, ditches, the chipper service is a very sought after. Limbs that are brought curbside, those guys will chip them. We have sweepers that keep the roadways free. You'll see a couple of those. Trying to think of some other things they do. We have 3 construction crews that will build retaining walls. We have a retaining wall right now that we're building, and a lot of pipe installation that are storm. We get confused a lot with the sanitary board.
Right.
But our sewers are storm sewers for stormwater runoff versus the sanitary lines that the sanitary board. I'm trying to think. Street department's very important in special events. A lot of road closures. They do.
Especially summertime with festival and regatta now. I mean, those guys. We were joking before we started the show today. The green shirts. The fluorescent green. You see them out there, and they're always working hard, getting things ready for the events.
Right. So that's a big part of it. And then then we have those big pumper trucks that you see out there, and those can they work on ditch culverts and so they're very versatile. The refuse and recycling department, that would be your trash, your curbside trash pickup and your recycling pickup, and they can help in a lot of other ways too. Sometimes we have a trash dump, a pile. Those guys will take the lead on that, and so that's the nature of what those guys do.
Let me back up just for you were talking about paving, and one thing and then of course I want to be cognizant this is a state show, so be careful what I say, but some of the roads in Charleston are not actually city roads. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Oh yeah, it's the McCorkle Avenue, for example, is the state. Greenbrier Street. Overwhelmingly Washington Street, which runs the whole length of the city.
So I want to bring it up because we work with the state on some of those things, and especially paving.
We have a great relationship with the state, and it's a great partnership. But I think their folks would agree is that they probably need to be working on their lines, and we need to be working on our lines, because there is some questions of liability that come up, or some questions of, and I'm sure they want to maintain, you know, their lines, and so some questions do come up on who fills a pothole on a state road versus a city road,
Yeah.
or but our relationship, they have offices very nearby, and so we can call them, and they're always there to support us, and vice versa.
I want to make sure I mention that, since we are, you know, sitting on a city or a state show. Let's go back to refuse and recycling. It's more than just trash and picking up aluminum cans. There's so much that they do as well. Can you talk a little bit about this recent recycling program? We have a couple of council members that are really interested in the green team and all that. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, first, with recycling, the 48-gallon blue bin, you know,
Right.
that you're seeing all over the neighborhoods now since probably May, somewhere around there when Mayor Goodwin initiated that. We've seen participation really skyrocket, because I think that it's made it easier for folks to recycle. Cardboard is one of the most desirable items to recycle. And before the bins came along, you were forced to break those down and put them in bags. Most people aren't going to do that, because they have to be dry for us to.
Right, that was the biggest issue.
Right, and
yeah.
so a lot of people are putting them in they're putting them in the bins now. They can close the lid, and so our volume, we would have to go back here in a few months and start looking at, probably run a study there and look. But participation is on the rise. We're currently taking our items to Beckley.
Still doing that, okay.
Still doing that, and that's a challenge. And they've
Right.
been a great partner, the Raleigh County Solid Waste Authority. But it's no secret. I mean, we're trying to find that local, local partner or a facility here. It's tough. Those guys driving those roads to Beckley in a Packer. They're very safe, but it's dangerous and it's expensive.
Yeah. So. I mean, with the increase, and this might be a tough question because I don't know the answer, but with the increase of recycling in Charleston because of the bins, are we looking for another option besides Beckley at this point?
We are,
Okay.
we are, and I think that the recycling the committee and also the green team, and I know that the city administration, the senior staff, they are, and I think that's been out in the media a little bit, of bringing a facility or having access to a facility much closer.
And we've been mentioning the green team, but I guess we should describe what it is. Green team is essentially a group of started council, didn't it?
The mayor initiated it.
Okay, she did.
And,
okay.
Yes, and they're working on many. My involvement with them is mostly recycling.
Right.
But they have
there's all kinds of.
Yeah, they have a variety of initiatives, sustainability type.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the late Councilman John Kennedy Bailey was very involved in that.
Very much so. Yes.
And then his predecessor, Emmett Pepper, kind of stepped in when he passed, has been really involved in that as well.
Right.
And of course, the mayor's office is with the bins and everything else that they've come up with, and just trying to push recycling.
Right. Well, it's mostly education. I mean, you've got to make it easy. You've got to have. We have to make sure, from the city standpoint, that we're clear on what we take and how we take it, how we collect it. But then it's educating and children and parents.
For those people out there, and I know in my own family, people recycle. My wife is really bad. She's obsessed with recycling. And we always look at the numbers on the bottom, make sure we're putting the right stuff in the bin, that kind of thing. For those who are out here thinking, well, what if you put the wrong number in, or you put something in recycling that's not recycling? And is there somebody who goes through all this? People often ask this question.
That's a great question. We take ours to Beckley, and that's the extent of what we do. There's sorters
so Beckley deals with that.
Yeah.
Okay,
so we're single stream, so everything that we collect goes together, and then it's sorted at that facility. So I don't know. It could contaminate it, or they could just remove something from there. And,
right.
So we do want to keep the integrity of it as much as possible. But that's a good question.
Well, we want to encourage people to continue to recycle, and it was during COVID when recycling was down because we couldn't recycle. There was people that actually were storing it in their garages, waiting for us to be able to recycle again. So a lot of people, at least in my circle, are really committed to it, and it's a great service that we've been able to provide with the bins and kind of increasing that.
Right.
And I think refuse, and again, they had to deal with just picking up trash.
Right. Well, the customer service, I mean, it's
Yeah.
well documented. I mean, it's
Yeah.
well documented. The customer service is really unbelievable because we don't have bag limits.
Right.
We run a truck through to get the metal, which could be like your washer and dryer. We run a truck through what we call an open top that might get furniture, and then of course yard waste. It's a variety of trucks to make this happen, but the customer service is through the roof.
It's amazing. Again, I'm speaking from personal experience because that's what I know. But there's been many times when I'll have my whole front yard with limbs, and I'll have Tuesday morning they're out there,
Right.
and it's amazing the service of them coming in. I didn't call; they just show up. It's been
Right.
incredible. And then I want to bounce on something we started back with when Mayor Goodwin came in. She started a program called Team Up to Clean Up, and you made me think about that when you're talking about the open tops. Can you talk a little bit about that, and we'll discuss?
The Team Up to Clean Up, right? It's litter is an issue everywhere,
Right.
and and it can really kind of take over a neighborhood. And it's very hard for the Public Grounds Department, which we haven't really spoken about them yet.
Yeah.
But it's everybody's responsibility to keep the city litter free. But we do have groups that go out and pick up litter, but it's really hard to keep up with it. So the Team Up to Clean Up, I think, was exactly designed with the idea of bringing partners in mind,
Yeah.
communities, neighborhoods, let people pick up trash in their neighborhoods, center some fellowship around it, and coffee and snacks and meeting points. And so I don't have the tonnage here to provide to you, but it's been very successful.
I remember when we had that, even after the very first one, the tonnage was incredible to me. I mean, I haven't been around refuse and those numbers before, but that first one was, I'm saying the first one being the first day, and we did series of 4 in different parts of the city. And I think the first one was East End.
I think so. We've done it
Back in 2000.
for every spring.
Yeah.
4 to 5 dates to make sure we're capturing, the geographical area of the city, and we've done it in the fall a few times too.
Yeah, and the communities, we had so many community members come out. John Butterworth over in Planning Office does some of the mapping, and I was discussing that with him recently. The amount of green shirts that we passed out, those volunteer shirts, it's incredible.
Well, and it's also schools use it as community service.
Yeah.
So there's different ways you can really get the Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. Those groups come out in mass, and Recovery Point, different groups. Yep.
Well, talking about litter everywhere, let's go ahead and use that as a transition for public grounds, because there's so much there.
Well, they're a Swiss Army knife type division, because when we're into the spring and summer, they're 75 to 80% grass cutting.
Yeah.
And they're responsible for grass cutting in city right of ways, and so and that list is extensive.
Yeah.
And now they also will maintain we have a Parks and Recreation department, and a lot of time that's associated with areas that have centers, ball fields, playgrounds. An example of public grounds, they maintain the City Services Center at Slack, Mary Price, those areas that are what we would call passive parks, Ruffner Park, Davis Park.
So the line is that if a passive park, it doesn't have playground.
That's usually the best.
Yeah, and we just had Rashawn on from Parks and Rec last episode, and that's if it has a playground, then they take care of it.
Yes, I mean the one area that we're sharing, those two groups are sharing, would be Slack. There's a water feature in Slack, and so we help them, they help us.
You guys work really well together.
Yeah, and so the living wall is maintained, and what's another big part of public grounds is all of the flower beds, and that list is extensive, and they maintain all the landscapes, and they keep assuming. Some of our garden clubs, they do a great job, but over the years, some of them, folks have moved on, or they can't maintain them anymore, and so the Public Grounds Department has taken a lot of those on, and they do a great job. And we sometimes have to stress patience with folks just to make sure, because that list, if you have access to it, it's pretty overwhelming list.
And then you drive around, you see all the green, you see all the flower, and again, they're another, like you said, a Swiss Army department where we need them for something, they're there. I mean, we've used the water buffalo, the big water truck for cleanups and things like that, and they're right there anytime we need them. We only have a couple minutes left, and what I want to do is there's two things that are coming up that are really important for public grounds and for people to know, in public works, I'm sorry, is salt and leaves, which is probably one of the, other than refuse, one of the two things that you get the most feedback on, I'm sure. Yeah.
Right. This time of year, leaves are falling, and Charleston's very fortunate to have a loose leaf program. I did a lot of research when I got here.
Right.
There's not very many cities our size in the state. I mean, almost none really that have a program like ours. We all want to get the leaves out of our drains, of course. You don't want them in the ditch lines, but we extend that into residential. But it's very important to point out that it's best described as a courtesy service. I think some folks look at it like it's a weekly service, like trash, but we only have a limited amount of number of trucks, and they're going through neighborhoods. They're not going through. They can't return every week to the same house. They're moving on because these are leaf vacuums, and it takes a long time to try to get everybody taken care of. And so the best advice I would recommend to people would be patient with us, but if you're frustrated with how fast we're making it to you, might want to consider bagging those, because we hear sometimes that my yard's turning brown or they're taking up a parking
and
spot.
so if they bag them, they get taken in the weekly.
That's weekly, and it's unlimited.
Correct.
And
Okay,
so it's a great service, but it's just, and a lot of folks don't know, even though it's been around for a while, a lot of folks don't know that it's not. They'll still call sometimes and say, well, I thought it was weekly, but really you'd probably need to be thinking maybe 2 times during leaf season if you're lucky.
Leaf season.
Maybe.
And it's the same trucks.
Yes, the very important part I was getting ready to say is that it's the same. These trucks are. That's why when we go to leaves, everything else shuts down.
Right.
No more pothole filling, no more of the other projects, and also most importantly, those same trucks spread salt.
Yeah.
So if we have any snow, 3 years ago, we had a little snowstorm that snuck in on us on Veterans Day. If you remember.
Oh yeah.
Well, we had advance notice, so one day to prep the trucks. That's one day to salt. And one day to put the spreaders off. I mean, so we lost 3 days of the leaf season, and so I just want to make folks understand to be very
and that doesn't start until October 31st.
October 31. Right. Last year the leaves didn't start falling until mid-November. This year they're falling a little earlier, but we do the best we can. But and then we're getting ready to get into snow season, which is that's probably the most unfortunate time of the year, because you're bound to weather and what it brings. But
always, we have so much we could have talked about, and we're out of time. But I do want to, as we're wrapping up today, in addition, thank you for watching. One thing that we didn't get to was CDL drivers, and so go to the website, check it out. The city is always looking for CDL drivers for the trucks. And so check that out. Come to Charleston, work for the City of Charleston and Public Grounds. Thank you so much for coming and being part of the show. And thank you for watching Cityscope.